Yay!
Hey, well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. We apologize for being so late, but technical issues had us waiting, but it couldn't stop us from coming live. So, perseverance, here we are. Sue, thank you so much for joining me again on this little mini series where we are again, talking about relationships. And today, probably one of the most important topics around relationships, and this is how do we change the way people treat you? Um, and this is uh, can be quite a tricky one. So I really am looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. And why is this such a big subject? For you as an example.
Well, the thing about the way people treat us, well, the first thing to say is that people take us at our own valuation, which means that if we don't like and respect ourselves, they won't either. The other problem is that people believe that if they stand up for themselves and insist that we treat it with consideration and respect, and rather old-fashioned word, accept that without respect for ourselves, respect for your partner and other people, and they in turn, their respect towards us, relationships will fail. That's the first thing to say. The other thing is that people don't like standing up for themselves because they don't want to rock the boat. They want to have peace. They are afraid of confrontation. At least that's what they tell themselves. And it's all false, incredibly false. And so what is needed is for us to change ourselves. And what that looks like in practice is we need to set personal boundaries. And most people never think about that. In fact, they avoid it because they are intimidated about what they might find.
So, Sue, I mean, just when you opened up there and when you commented about how people see themselves, and that is just such a big thing because we don't often realize how that impacts everything else.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm just sitting here, and normally it takes me a while to go through various questions, and that before I'm stumped, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, wow, okay, speechless already, because very seldomly do people look inwards as to how the outer world is treating them. Um, so starting with self is so important.
Yes. But usually people blame everybody else. I have to confess, I did that with my ex-husband, Bill, my first marriage. It was all his fault. Until I decided, well, I didn't decide, it took a lot of coaching before I finally got it. But I realized that I too contributed. That's the first thing. I contributed to my own unhappiness, but part of it was also tolerating the intolerable, the unacceptable. So if you say we are all responsible if we are in an unhappy relationship, and people say, but they are the ones who treat us badly, and that may be so, but we allow it. We don't put a stop to it. But putting a stop to it needs us to feel good about ourselves. That's where it all starts. If we don't believe we deserve to be treated with consideration, then we let things pass. It's not so bad. He didn't mean it. those were certainly that's what I used to say to myself. He loves me really. It's, and it's not true.
So, I'm just thinking, because obviously people, with your example, you mentioned that you were in marriage, in a marriage for a long time,
Yes,
and this happens within business as well, with business relationships where they've been for a long time. So that word tolerate comes in, and that means there's always and I'm just thinking of like an animal that's on a leash. Is you that mentality that they use in the circus with the elephant and the peg, where they hold the elephant, they put the peg into the ground really solidly so that the elephant can't move, but then eventually the mindset becomes that, well, I'm stuck, I can't move, and
yes,
then
excellent example.
eventually they can just have the rope tied around a toothpick and they won't move because they
And
believe
it
they can't.
continues to walk in a small circle.
Yeah,
Yes.
so how do we break that cycle? How do we change the way people treat us? And I know you've already referred to the fact that the reflection of self is important. um, where does one start with this journey? Because if it's something that's set and it's been like that for months or years, how do you break that cycle?
Well, and the first thing you might like to do is to think about how you do not want to be treated. I don't want to be taken for granted. I don't want to be ignored. I don't want you to make decisions, especially important decisions, without consulting me, and so on. Um, I don't want to always keep me waiting without phoning me to tell me that you're okay or you're going to be late, because that's inconsiderate and disrespectful. So those are all behaviors, and some, interestingly enough, seem small, and you think, it's no point making a fuss. But it is, because it mounts, and the impact on you is cumulative.
Yeah.
So write down how you do not want to be treated and think about that. And then the next step is, how would you like to be treated instead? I want to be consulted. I want to be taken seriously. I want to be listened to properly without being interrupted. Um, that kind of thing. I'd like you to support me when I need it, not always be too busy. My first husband used to say, I've got enough on my plate, for example, and then I shut up and got on with it.
And
But
yeah, I'm thinking that this kind of you know I'm thinking of the word abuse coming into my head, and more self abuse, where you are almost not compromising, but condoning and allowing yourself to be treated in a certain way because you've almost conditioned yourself to say that
yes,
this is okay.
oh, yes, exactly. But I've also trained my partner to carry on, and you train them, because repetition without putting a stop to it will continue and continue, and and probably make it even worse.
I think an example comes to mind for me, that is more reflective on the workplace as an example. Because one
Okay.
of the things I learned, I worked for a very large organization for almost, well over 10 years, and in fact I'd gone back to the organization to help them grow their business and do various bits. But regardless of the business, the way I and where I was with myself, meant I allowed certain behaviors to become okay. So, and what I mean by that is, as an example, a lot of people in the workplace don't feel appreciated. They feel that they are overlooked, or that they don't get appreciated for the amount of effort they put in. And I was in that situation where I was first in, last out, working like a madman. And then the one day I decided, my daughter had an event at school, and I wanted to take some time off and I was going to leave an hour and a half early just to go and see, my daughter at this event. And I got called in by one of the senior directors and said, "Oh, we've got to have a meeting at the end of the day." And I was like, "Well, I can't make it." And they were like, "No, you have to. And it's within working hours, so you can't expect not to be there." And I went, "Well, hold on. What about all the hours before working hours start and after working hours finish that I've put in over the last few years? And you're asking and giving me a hard time about an hour on one day? What about the last few years?" And I thought about this, and that kind of got me to snap. And I realized that I had conditioned my workplace to understand that I'm always available. And I ended up leaving that company because I thought they didn't respect me. But I realized when I left that I had made it okay for them to treat me like that. And when I went into the next company that I worked at, I made sure that I was in the office on time and I left on time. But when they really needed me, I would say, I would go, "Okay, no problems, I'll help out." But because it came across that I was helping out, because this is my time, it was after hours, I would, the owner of the company would come to me afterwards and go, "Mac, thank you so much for staying a few extra hours yesterday and helping out." And I thought, hold on, I'd never had that at the other organization, because they just expected me to be the first in and last out. So therefore I hadn't set my boundaries. But then maybe 2-3 months later, I'd said yes so many times to doing those few extra hours that all of a sudden, when I wanted to leave back on time so I can go and see my kids or go and spend time with my family, I felt guilty leaving early. And this is the same with relationships. So
absolutely,
it's, if you don't stick to your boundaries, how do they know what those boundaries are?
Well, they don't. And worse, we condition them. And worse even is that we condition ourselves, because you said that when you left on time, you felt guilty.
Yeah. And that's the part that I think is such a big lesson here, is learning that actually how people treat ourselves is how we allow people to treat us, and without setting those boundaries. So how do we get to that stage where we can change that? Sue, what are the things that you suggest to people that you
Well,
work with?
actually, you just mentioned one. Something happens and it triggers, and you've had enough.
Yeah.
And you said, this is not on. They will respect you more at work and at home. And the other one is, you need to think about what is acceptable to you. What do you want? Because once you know how you want to be treated, then you can, when people cross the line or keep demanding more and more, or treating you carelessly, you can actually recognize it, because you give it some thought and say, hold on, when you talk to me like that, it's hurtful. Did you mean to hurt me or what? Not go on the counterattack, because it makes things worse. But to say what it feels like, exactly as you did. Hold on, I've been giving you a lot of time over the years, and I'm asking for 1 hour once, and you're giving me a hard time. You didn't say, as an employer, you stink. You
Yeah.
were honest. You were honest.
And this
Then you
this
did
is
something else. Wait a minute, because then you
ooh,
did something else. Because they didn't change in the way they treated you, you decided to leave your job. And then you find a company that actually valued you and appreciate you the extra mile you would go. And it's the same in our personal relationships. It's sometimes a hard decision to make. But unless you want to continue being, and there is no other word, a victim, then you have to decide what is non-negotiable here. I mean, it's not
sure.
an easy decision to make, but start thinking along those lines.
So, what would you suggest with regards to non-negotiables? Because I, I personally think it's quite hard to make decisions when you're hyper emotional. So, as an example, at that moment where I was asked to, no, I have to stay. I don't have a choice because it's within working hours. I wasn't seeing how they were perceiving it. I was seeing all the buildup of all the times I've spent, all those hours, all the
Yes,
events I've missed, and to make a decision um, when you're really, because this is ironically how so many businesses start, is
oh,
how, because of an emotional reaction, and I've seen this so much, and this is why a lot of businesses fail, is because they, somebody has just, they've had that snapping moment. I've had enough of being told I can't have a lunch break, or I've been had enough of I've got to do overtime, or I've got just whatever the event is that becomes enough. That
yeah,
becomes the emotional trigger. And then people go and say, well, I can do this on my own. And they start a business, but they haven't had a rational opportunity to think about what's involved. And then they
yes,
start a business. And I've done this in the past, many, many years ago, where I started a business because um, I didn't feel I was being treated properly. The problem was I didn't know the ins and outs of the operational side in that industry
ah,
to keep to get my. And I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll just make it happen. Um, but then you start this business, and then that little thing called pride kicks in, where maybe a few months or even a year in, and you kind of go, okay, maybe I should just, this wasn't a great decision. Why did I do this? This is not what I actually wanted, but it was a reaction to.
yeah,
So a lot of people and relationships ended up like the rebound relationships, as
yes,
an example.
exactly.
Um, so, and then we go in and we open our eyes one day and we go, hold on, why am I doing this? But then because of pride, uh, or because we don't want to acknowledge that we've made a mistake. Um, you know,
Yes, often the same. But yeah.
so what do you suggest? How do we go about um, making sensible or reasonable decisions? Do you take yourself for a cup of coffee away from the situation? Away from home? Do you go and take a break for 24 hours where you can just sit with yourself? Like what process would you recommend to sit there and evaluate
Well,
what your
that is
boundaries are, as an example?
well, all of that is a good examples, and because they all do the same thing, they take you away from the heat of the situation. Whether it's a cup of coffee, going away for a couple of days, whatever it is, it takes you away from the heat of the situation. In my case, it took me about a year to finally decide that the pain of staying was worse than the fear of the unknown. It took me a year. Then I had that. Have I mentioned the gremlin? I must have more than once. That negative inner critic that scares you into you are too old to leave. Nobody's ever going to love you again. How are you going to survive? Blah 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 blah. That's why it took me so long to decide. And then it took me another year before I actually told him I was leaving. And then, but before I even told him, I consulted my financial advisor and I consulted a solicitor, and the solicitor just to find out what does it involve to get divorced. Because I never imagined in a million years that I would ever get divorced. It's partly the reason I stayed as long as I did. But the other thing was that I chose a solicitor and I made it absolutely clear that would not be confrontational. I know that divorce can be really aggressive and hostile, but where humanly possible, was going to try not to go on the counterattack and make things worse. As it happened, it worked in my case, but it doesn't always work with in situations like that because everybody is angry, everybody is resentful, everybody blames everybody else, and they want to get the best of each other. I know all that. But it would help you in the longer term, if you can, not to enter into that kind of battle or to go to, you don't have to go to conventional solicitors nowadays. There are people, and I can name some if necessary, that I would recommend, who actually take an alternative approach that costs less and is more conciliatory and gets you the same result, which is divorce. So it doesn't have to be that kind of situation. So give it some thought. Find out what it involves. Will you live? But the other thing, when people say, I couldn't possibly live on my own, I haven't worked forever, to that person, I would say, is money everything? It's like, is it your money or your life? What will you choose? So cutting down on any non-essential for the sake of freedom and the opportunity to create a loving relationship with yourself first, and then with friends, and then if it happens, with a love companion. But it all comes from trying to change how people treat you. And it also goes with to stop accepting unacceptable behaviors. The first step is always to try and resolve it with your current husband or partner, always. And to give 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 chances. But if they don't love you enough to make the effort, don't value the marriage enough to make the effort, then you have to make the hard decision.
So, Sue, I'm thinking here that at the same time, because communication is one of those things that people so often get wrong because of assumption, because of the way they have grown up or their own personal circumstances. And this is why wars start, because people have a difference of opinion, because they had a totally different experience in life, and therefore
Yes.
don't see the way somebody else does things necessarily as the right way. And so many debates around this, but I guess when it comes to that communication side of things, of how people treat you, is if we don't communicate that properly, or don't take the time to state what we want to be treated like, then how does anybody else around you know that they are hurting you or being
Exactly.
So how do we breach that subject? Because the thing that comes to mind to me is the longer you leave it to set those boundaries, to explain to people how you want to be treated, the harder it gets, because there's almost like you've now built up a reputation as to how you have accepted things.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you want to come up and go, well, hey, I don't like being treated like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you build that up to make that stance to, because and for anybody watching and listening, I urge you to make sure that these, as per our previous session, Sue, is make sure that you are very upfront and you know what you want as your own personal boundaries, as it were, because if you don't respect your own boundaries, how can anybody else? But Sue, what can people do once that they've already, how's the saying go, when you've given enough rope to hang yourself, because you've kind of gone, yeah, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, and then you've gone stop, and then it's too late.
No, it's never too
Potentially.
late. Absolutely not. So, but the first
Okay.
thing I would say for anyone who watches or listens to this, I would say, and you might be single, looking for a relationship. If you are, then set your boundaries, your personal boundaries, before you enter a new relationship. So that's the first thing I would say. If you already are in a relationship, the thing is, we never are the same person. I mean, are you the same person your wife married?
Probably very, very different now.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Exactly. So people change. I mean, you probably wouldn't have married your husband if he had behaved then as he's behaving now. And so people change for better or worse.
Yeah.
So in your case, I would encourage you to change for the better by setting personal boundaries. Now, how to affirm them is not a once and for all. It's like, wait a minute. What do you mean you decided to go scuba diving? You know I'm scared of water. What makes you think of doing that? For example. Um, and you can say, look, you may like to go, but I'm not going. I'm just not going. And stick with it. I already paid the down payment. You didn't consult me. I'm sorry. But you always come along. Well, not now. You know what? You go and I'll do something that I will enjoy. It's, but you have to feel good enough in yourself. You have to know that you are worthy of being treated with consideration. Because otherwise, you won't dare to make a stand. Or you'll go, oh, all right. And then end up bored, frustrated, and resentful. They're having a whale of a time, and you're hating it. And you're just sitting there. And that doesn't help anybody. And you feel really bad about yourself. So if you give in for the sake of peace, I guarantee you it's not going to work. It's going to eat you up from inside. It will.
Sure.
Shit.
Just give me a second. We're having a. There we go. A technical glitch. So, there's so many things rushing through my head right now. So, what I want to say to people, if you're watching this, do us a favor, put your questions in the chat for Sue. If you have any questions for her or any statements that you'd like to add. I know this is quite a personal conversation because it's something that it kind of hits close to home for many of us, because at any given stage, every single human, I think, goes through a stage where we feel either not appreciated or overlooked or one of those things. And it's how do we it's one of those things that, you know, I'm thinking we're on, you know, live platforms here like LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, and many of us might be watching this and thinking, "Ooh, okay, these things resonate with me." And if they do, you know, and you feel that you can't necessarily go and comment on a public forum, that's okay. Yeah, but feel free to
I
reach
would
out.
offer, I would offer a chat, a free conversation where you can explore what chimed with you. I'd be
Yeah.
very happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. All my contact details are there.
So, you know, definitely reach out to Sue and have a conversation, because it may just be the best conversation you ever have investing in yourself. You know, so, you know, if you have felt for a while that, you know, people aren't treating you the way you feel that you deserve to be treated, you know, the tough part is that it starts with us, eh, Sue? You know,
Hmm.
we have to make that decision.
But you know, actually, the one thing that I would say is that people don't believe that they deserve to be treated with consideration, because often they believe that they're not worthy. And that often stops them from looking after themselves. And I'm here to tell them I did it for 37 years, darling, and it didn't do me any good. I'm 77 now, and it took me until I was 56. That's not true. Until I was 60 before I finally learned that I deserved better. And it was a hard lesson. So
And
you don't have to wait that long. That's why I'm
yeah,
sitting here sharing my story.
oh, you know, Sue, you know, every time you mention and you share your story, and I think about how many people don't have the opportunity to make that change because of that inner gremlin, as you put it, you know, that deprives you from living the life that you could be living,
Yes.
from doing the great things that you should be doing, from
Oh, God, yes.
impacting people's lives, and living your best life. Um, so,
God.
sure. Sue, you are an inspiration. And I'm so glad that you've taken the courage to be so open about the opportunities that are there, but sharing the hardships and the journey that you've been on and the pain that you've had to go through to
Yes.
get to a stage where, like, you know, every time I see you, even if you're having a, you know, there's a rough day or something's the smile just comes through, and it's like, you know, you own the space and you're in control of your life, and your boundaries are so strong. And for me, you know, when I first started working with you, I was like, "Ooh, hold on, how come like she like has very specific thing?" And I was like, "Wow!" And it was inspirational for me because I kind of looked at myself, going, "Hmm, are my boundaries, you know, strong enough? Do people know where they stand with me?" And if you don't have these things in place, you know, with regards to, you know, boundaries, your values, then how can you expect anybody else, if you don't know what those are? How can you expect
Exactly.
anybody else to know them?
I would like to add one thing in case I scared people off with my example of the scuba diving. It doesn't have to be huge. You can start small. You have to stop saying it's not so bad. Stop saying I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, because those molehills grow to become a mountain over time. So don't be afraid to talk to me if you think that I'm going to say, divorce the guy, the jerk. It's time to leave. No, I would never do a thing like that. But you can start small and begin to feel confident to say, you know, I don't want this. I want this. I think we have an interview about how to ask for what you need.
Yes. I'm just having a look at which one. because we have make sure your needs are met. That's the next one, Sue. How to make sure your needs are met.
Good
So
timing.
yeah, absolutely. Keep an eye out for that one, because we've got 8 different topics that we're covering, and we've got, so the next one is what makes your how to make sure that your needs are met. Then we have how to what stops you from getting what you really want, and this is the gremlin. And
God,
so
yes.
we're going to be having some interesting discussions around these. And then why we need to be selfish, which I found was when we first discussed that topic, I was like, okay. And it's interesting how anyway, we'll get to that one before I go down a rabbit hole, because that's going to be an interesting discussion. And then how to feel good about yourself right away. Now that is I think going to be a game changer for a lot of people. So please continue to follow Sue, connect with her, go and check out her profile. If you go and see some of the posts that she puts out, hard-hitting stuff. Sue talks about her own personal experiences, but also shares great advice on there as well. And Sue, do you want to tell people a little bit about your new company page that people can go and follow?
It's called Embrace the True You. And actually, it says it does what it says on the tin. It's for you to discover who you truly are, because we tend to play small, but you are so much more, except you don't know it yet. And that's because it's been our true self has been overlaid with all kinds of crap that comes from society and past experiences and the media, and then unpacking it to find out, the beauty in you. It's a hell of a journey, and that is my mission.
Oh, Sue, I'm so glad that firstly I've come across you in my lifetime, but also the fact that we get this opportunity to share these important messages that can potentially help change somebody's life today. I urge people to really have a listen to not only this episode but the previous episodes that Sue and I have done, and go and take some time. This is available on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and if anything has resonated with you, or you just appreciate some of the things that Sue has brought up in these conversations, do us a favor, go and drop it into the comments and just let her know some of your thoughts, and show some appreciation for the time that she's taken to come and just share with us, when this is not something that many people would be confident enough, and Sue does it with a smile on her face. Sue, any final thoughts from you as we wrap up today?
You deserve better, whether you know it or not.
And Sue's talking to you, so hopefully you are listening today and taking this to heart. Each one of you out there deserve better, deserve the best, you deserve to live the best life. So don't compromise.
Don't waste it.
Yeah,
don't waste it.
Absolutely.
Such
Sue,
a joy to be here. I'm delighted you invited me. It's great. I love it.
I'm so glad we overcame the technical challenges
Worth
and
waiting
persevered.
for.
Absolutely.
Worth waiting for.
Absolutely. But Sue, thank you so much. I wish you an incredible day. And
you.
everybody out there, thank you so much for watching. Please tag or share this with anybody that you feel that this might be worthwhile or relevant to watching. I'm sure there's something that we've covered in here that will resonate with every single person out there. And on that note, we are going to have our final video outro. Sue, I look forward to seeing you on our next episode on how to make sure your needs are met.
I look forward to it.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Sue. Have an incredible day. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.